Welcome back to Animatron University. My name is Jesse Bray, and I'm your instructor. In this lecture, we're going to talk about good guys and bad guys. These are the subjects we're going to cover. Character archetypes, setting as character expanded, and how to end your story. Now, character archetypes are important. A perfect example is to look at comic books. You have DC and Marvel. Now, DC comic books and Marvel, they've both been very successful from both films and comics themselves, but there is a huge difference between the way the characters were created. And this is an important thing to think about. Stan Lee, when he came up with his characters, he always gave them a human aspect. He always gave them a human attributes. He gave them superpowers inside of normal human beings. And that creates a certain level of inner conflict that we as people can relate to. However, with DC comic books, the characters are often statuesque. They're more of archetypes in the traditional classical sense, resembling truth or justice or vigilante. There are these ideas within the DC comics that are quite different to Marvel comics. Marvel comics uses a real city. They use a real life example. People live in New York, or they live somewhere that people already live. In DC Comics, it's a made-up place. Why does it matter? I'm not trying to debate which comic book is better or which superhero is better, but that these characters represent excellent archetypes. But I want you to think about the difference between these characters that are written. The Marvel character archetype is more human and more relatable. It is the Wolverine character who's good, but also is the perfect example of an anti-hero. Someone who is, at his nature, raw and unable to control himself, but at the same time has a certain heart of gold that we love and we've grown to appreciate. When you're developing your good guys, your protagonists, your antagonists, when you're developing your protagonists and antagonists for your story, think about different degrees of good, different degrees of bad. People in ourselves, we're not all good and all bad. We're capable of doing good things and really awful things. To create great interest, let your characters be a degree of bad. Let them be a degree of good. Give them some sort of human attributes and you'll make more interesting characters. We all love a good villain that's charismatic, that is evil to the core, but at the same time super charismatic, funny, brilliant. This is somehow, it's intoxicating for people to have a villain like that. When a villain is clearly evil and always wants bad things and we're kind of grossed out by them, we're not intrigued by that villain. We have no interest in that villain. The same goes for your heroes. Make your heroes and your heroines someone that's interesting. And by making them interesting, you give them flaws, you give them a gradation of good and evil. Now let's talk about settings expanded. How can our settings be characters? I want to give you a few examples of a setting being a character. We have The Shining, which is a haunted, evil hotel. We have Money Pit, which is a house that's just constantly falling apart. We also have things like Scrubs, where the hospital itself is an environment. It's an environment where these doctors live. Your environment is the center where your characters live. Think about how your characters orbit that environment. There's a great episode of Futurama where the Planet Express ship gains a personality, and there's a romantic encounter between Bender and the Planet Express ship. This personality that was given deliberately to the spaceship creates a whole fun new dynamic. Think of ways to give life to the planet that your characters orbit. Now here is something when it comes to ending your story. There is a few different pieces of advice that I would like to give you that seems to be as true for me whenever I watch a great story or I'm writing my own story. The tip that I've heard is that start late, finish early. You don't have to explain why your characters got to the diner, but start in the diner. Have them having a conversation. You don't have to have them finish their meal. You can have them walk out the door, and we will know that they finished their meal. You don't have to resolve everything, but you do need to resolve the important things. Another tip for ending your story is have your ending in mind before you begin. If you think about Harry Potter, and specifically Professor Snape, the significance of that character's life had to have been thought out with her pen to paper. Have your characters well thought out. Spend time, do your homework, and make your stories believable, exciting, and interesting. I'll see you all later in the course.